In this episode, I'm going to demonstrate the use of the Liquify filter just to add a finishing touch on this image, and in particular to further add to the illusion that the tree trunks are part of the image of the hand. So what I want to do is kind of just go along the creases here and change the contours a bit to make it look like the image of the tree is kind of part of the hand and changing direction with the lines on the palm of the hand. So I want to try and make it look like uh, the tree trunk is like part of the hand and it changes contour with the contours of the hand itself. So the way I'm going to do that is with the Liquify filter, and I want to show you, a few of the different features of the Liquify feature. But before I do that, I want to make some copies and merge the visible layers that I have here so that I can work on with the Liquify filter a little bit more efficiently. So I'm going to make copies of each layer by alt-clicking and dragging, and then turning off the visibility of one of those copies. We'll do the same thing down here, alt-click and drag. I could also press Control-J, that would work too. All right, so again, I just have the two layers visible, and then I would want to go to Layer and Merge Layer. Now, if you notice, my visible layers are not actually selected. I've selected this layer of the hand image with that mask. So if I go to layer and I try and merge layers or merge visible, it's not going to let me do that because the layer I have active or selected is not actually visible. So when you're merging your visible layers, make sure you have at least one of the visible layers selected, um, and make sure the layer is visible. So make sure you have at least one of those visible layers selected. Then click Layer and go to Merge Visible. All right, so essentially what I did is just combine those two visible layers together as one. And I'm going to make a copy of this as well. Alt click and drag. And I like to make backup copies just in case you get into a destructive edit mode and you want to go back to your original image, or at least the original edited image, um, rather than having to go back and merge the visible layers. It's good to have some backup layers here. You can always go back and delete them if you don't need them in the future. But in general, until you really kind of get used to working with Photoshop and your layers, it doesn't hurt to make an additional copy. So we'll turn off one of those layers. And I want to use the Liquify filter at this point to just change the contour of the tree trunks, so that the contour kind of fits the contour of the wrinkles on the skin on the hand. So the filter that I want to use is the Liquify filter. It's under the filter menu, and you come down to Liquify. Now, if you notice, Liquify is showing up at the top because that was the last filter I used. So whatever filter you end up using, that ends up coming to the top of that menu. So I'm going to come down to Liquify, and that'll open up the options for editing with the Liquify filter. Now, over on the left side, you have different tools. You have the forward warp tool, you have the reconstruct tool, the smooth tool, the twirl clockwise tool, the pucker tool, the bloat tool, the push tool, or the push left tool. And then you have some masking options as well, where you can freeze part of the mask or freeze part of the Liquify effect or filter. And then you can also thaw the mask. The other features, the face tool is not actually available on the older versions of Photoshop. So I'm just going to go over some of the basics here, which you'll more than likely see on your uh, version of Photoshop. So really what I want to use is probably the pucker tool, but I just want to show you some of the other options here while we're at it. So the twirl clockwise tool, and when I activate that tool, you'll see a brush circle kind of showing up. I have some options over here. I can change the size. I can change the density and the rate at which the effect will occur. So I can also use my bracket keys to increase or decrease the size of the brush. The right bracket key will increase the size of the brush while the left bracket key will decrease it. So the twirl clockwise really is not going to give me what I want. This is a bit much. You know, this isn't really what I'm after. I mean, it's kind of an interesting effect, but it's a bit distracting. It's not helping integrate these images together. If I use this here, it's going to do some really weird things. It's just a bit too severe. But the nice thing about the Liquify filter is there's a tool here to reconstruct things, the reconstruct tool. So if you activate the reconstruct tool, if you want to reverse one of those effects, you can just click and drag over top of that area. Now, the problem with working with a JPEG image is as soon as I click OK, those changes are now permanent. The filter is a destructive editing mode if I'm working directly on my JPEG image. All right. So if I go back into the Liquify filter now, and I say, oh no, I didn't want to actually do the twirl thing there, or the twirl clockwise. If I try and use the reconstruct tool, it's not going to work. I can click and drag on that as much as I want. It's not going to work. If I apply a new effect, and I start twirling this, and I say, that looks terrible. I don't want to do that. I can still use the reconstruct tool here since it's a new edit. But again, I can't go back and change that filter or undo that filter. And I'm basically stuck with it. So I would recommend that if you're going to use a Liquify filter, do not use the filter directly on a JPEG image or a layer that is made up of a JPEG image. So what I want to do instead is come down to this copy that I had made. I'm going to make it into a smart object. So I'm going to right click, go to convert to smart object. Now this is a smart object. The beauty of this is if I come over to my Liquify filter and I go overboard with the twirl clockwise, or the bloat tool. I'll show you how that kind of works. You can click and drag. It kind of inflates an area depending on where you're holding the mouse and dragging that brush. Again, it can do some really weird things. That actually was the pucker tool. Let's see, so that you can kind of click and drag. You can see if I go outside, it'll alternate which surface it kind of puckers and affects. Actually, that was the bloat tool, excuse me. So the pucker tool and the bloat tool are kind of similar. Maybe we can kind of bump up the size here so you can kind of see what this is going to do. That's kind of closer to what I want. I'm going to go a little bit smaller. And I think I'll go along the creases here and just get a little bit of puckered kind of effect here. Nothing too outrageous, just something very subtle. Just to kind of further accent that change from the creases on the original hand. I'm trying to merge the appearance of those two images together. So again, if I wanted to undo some things, I can go to the reconstruct tool. I want to fix this area, brush over that, bring it back to where it was originally. And then if I click OK, the beauty of this, of working with a smart object, if you look, now I have another sublayer underneath this layer which has that specific effect listed. So I can toggle the visibility of that effect on or off. So it's a non-destructive way to edit. I could even mask out part of that if I wanted to. Now, if I click on this and turn it on, oh, I forgot to get rid of the Liquify effect. So if I click, or I come down to where it says Liquify here and I double click, that'll open up the options, the editing options for the Liquify tool. Now if I use the reconstruct tool, I can still go back and reconstruct that edit that I made previously. So the beauty of working with smart objects is that any filter I apply becomes a smart filter, and I can undo the effects. All right, so that's looking pretty good. Maybe we'll go with the pucker tool again and just kind of go over some of these areas just a little bit more. Kind of just tweak out some of that just to kind of change it just ever so slightly, not going overboard with it. And if I wanted to mask some areas, if I knew for a fact I didn't want to affect certain areas, you can paint a mask on a certain area so that the effect does not occur in that area. And I'll just switch back to the twirl tool to make this a little bit more obvious. So you can see where it's not affecting, I'm twirling this, all right, but it's not affecting that area. If I use a thaw mask, well, I can undo the mask, essentially just paint over that area. So if I wanted to make that twirl effect happen here, now it will do it. Okay, so if I knew for a fact I didn't want to mask or have the effect, particular Liquify filter effect happen on any part, you can mask it out by using the freeze mask tool. If you want to undo it, you thaw the mask. And actually, I'm going to go back to the reconstruct tool and bring some of this back. I don't want to have that quite so distorted. Not really what I'm after. And then I can go back to the freeze mask or the thaw mask and just paint over this. I want to kind of doing some weird stuff down here too. So I want to undo some of that. Just painting over the red parts of the mask, indicating that that's the part that was masked out. And I just want to click over this and drag to kind of repair the damage that was created there with that filter, with the twirl clockwise filter, or the tool, I guess. All right, so that's looking pretty good. And let's go back to the finished version. I'm just going to click edit, OK rather. Just going to click OK. And you can kind of see again down here, if I go to the Liquify filter and I turn that off, you can kind of see the before and after effect. It's a very subtle change, and that's all I'm really looking for here, is just a slight change. Whether or not you actually need the Liquify filter in your image kind of depends on what images you're combining together. For what I'm doing, I think it does kind of help make it look like it's just a subtle variation there. The change of the contours kind of more mimicking the contours of the skin of the hand, at least the contours of the tree. Okay, so that's looking really good. And then the next video I'm going to show you is just how to add another vignette, another technique for the vignette in the background.